Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our 200th episode of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I am your co-host, Billy Bob. I am on the West Coast. I have my other co-host, Ian Cummer, streaming live from his dacha in Crimea. He has his new VPN, so we're hoping we don't have any technical issues where he drops out. But you know what? I have a really long lecture prepared, and so if Ian drops out, I'll hold down the fort. But so today's episode is entitled, "Is Trump Building a New World Order on American Energy?" And I just want to really talk about this and make several very important points. The first thing I really want to do is just say my bad for not appreciating what I think is, a really obvious reality that I should have appreciated, on our first episode, because it is so clear, plain, and obvious, what the play is here with the West effort. So I've always said a real summary about, the United States is interested in attaining a net energy decrease, right? We're trying to what's the word for decrease when we instead of increase, we there's another word for a scarcity. So we want a net energy scarcity. We're going to make energy more scarce around the planet, and then we're going to attain a monopoly of the scarce energy resources that are left. We're gonna, the United States, the West, the transnational oligarchy is going to want to monopolize the scarce energy resources that are left. And then those energy resources can be weaponized for super profits, and also weaponized for geopolitical, as geopolitical levers and tools to wreck economies of those countries that don't do what we tell them. So I've been clear about this, and I'm happy that I've been saying this consistently for years. And what I've recently learned, though, I really wish I would have known, and really appreciated a couple of years ago, because it was obvious then too. So what am I talking about? So I'm talking about the United States and their shale oil / liquid natural gas reserves that were really discovered between 1990 and 2010-ish. So during that time, we discovered that we had this shale oil resource, and we were developing technologies to extract it. And so we actually did, right? So from 1990 to 2010, we developed these technologies to extract oil and natural gas from our natural resources that we have an abundant supply of. But the problem was it was expensive to extract, right? So while the Middle East could extract oil for $10 a barrel and still make a profit, if oil was selling at $15 a barrel, ours cost like $30 or $40 a barrel just to get out of the ground. And so it couldn't compete. It wasn't cost effective. And what Saudi Arabia did around, between 2015 and 2016, Saudi Arabia crashed the global energy markets by ramping up production and just causing the price of oil, of energy, to go down. And this bankrupted a lot of the investors that had invested in the shale and natural gas extraction in the United States. So the domestic companies, the U.S. companies that had invested in that, really got destroyed by Saudi Arabia's play on the energy market to increase production and to increase production and drive down the price and make it unprofitable for these U.S. extractors and the U.S. domestic companies. So this is when the United States started thinking geostrategically about their position and about how they can utilize this resource and not allow other countries to, number one, make our companies go bankrupt, and number two, have leverage against us, right? So we want, the United States, the transnational oligarchy who owns the United States and uses the United States to further their class interests. That's when they really went to work strategizing about how we can use this resource to our geostrategic advantage, how we can maximize the potential, maximize the utility of this resource, to maximum effect for our geostrategic advantage. So what are our geostrategic goals? Well, there's many of them, but it's basically total global hegemony, right? And controlling all the resources, markets, and governments on the planet. That's what the Western Empire wants to do. To achieve that, you have to go after a couple sovereign, strong states who are intransigent and who are obstacles to this hegemony. So those states are Iran, Russia, and China. And so how is the United States going to use this resource to destroy Iran, Russia, and China? Especially when the resource is expensive to extract and it can't compete on a global market with much cheaper energy alternatives, namely the Middle East and Russia. Russia, of course, had just pipelines of liquid natural gas going to Europe, and there's no way the U.S. could compete with that. So in 2016, what do you think the strategists came up with to do? Now we could, just say that everything is a coincidence, right? And all the wars that followed that allowed the United States to have what I'm going to demonstrate they have now, and I have the numbers, and it's really interesting. So essentially, they engineered some wars. They engineered a war in Russia with Ukraine, and then they engineered a war with Iran. And both of these wars have had the result of, what I've been explaining for years. They've had the result of decreasing the total supply of global energy, creating an artificial scarcity where the U.S. and its domestic production is the only alternative in town, because you no longer have access to Middle Eastern energy, and you no longer have, or you have diminishing access. Well, Europe doesn't have access at all to Russian energy. Other countries do, but so Europe has cut itself off from Russian energy for the most part. And so what we saw was in 2019 we had not a real profitable liquid natural gas and shale oil energy export market in the United States. So what we had was a pretty much a baseline that had stabilized at, I have it here, about $2 to $3 billion annual of monthly profits. So the shale, the domestic U.S. suppliers of liquid natural gas and shale oil had stabilized at 2019 with annual profits of about $2 to $3 billion a month. Okay. So then we had COVID, we had a pandemic, we had a crash in energy demand, and we saw zero for the second quarter of 2020. We saw zero profits, and we saw actually some losses. Right? We had the recovery in 2021, the post-pandemic recovery, and U.S. Exporters of liquid natural gas and shale oil monthly profits went to about $4 to $5 billion. Okay, so you with me so far? And now their strategy kicks in. We initiate a war with Russia. We blow up the Russian pipeline that allowed Europe access to cheap energy, and we forced Europe to start having extreme dependence on our energy exports. Now hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Because this is a very important factor that I missed. So the important factor is the United States from 2016 to even to today, have been heavily investing in an export logistics infrastructure, right? In order to export liquid natural gas and to export shale oil to other countries. Now, do you understand that in 2016, when these heavy investments started pouring in, they made no sense at all. They were ridiculous. They were ridiculous bets because everybody knew that it cost 3 or 4 much to pull our ground than it did for Russia or for the Middle East. So there is no way in hell any sensible person would have put any money in such a risky investment where the global market, the existing market, would not have needed any of this infrastructure to be developed. It was only if these people could have known there was a plan to wreck Middle East oil production, to wreck Russian energy production. That is the only sensible way that anyone would have invested in this very expensive oil infrastructure, including huge tankers to export liquid natural gas, from the American continent to Europe and to Asia. Like, I mean, investing in this stuff made no sense at all. And so again, it's just proof. It's proof. It is undeniable proof from my perspective of how what's going on right now has all been planned out. So back to the profits. So now we're about 4 to 5 billion, a post COVID stabilization where liquid natural gas and shale oil exports are causing profits about 4 to 5 billion per month for the United States, domestic companies. Now we have the Russian war, we have the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, and we have increased dependence on, of Europe on U.S. energy. So what do the profits go up to? The profits go up to 12 to 13 billion dollars. This is the first surge with the Ukraine war. We saw 12 to 15 billion dollars. They kind of did plateau from 2023 to 2025. They plateaued at about 8 billion to 11 billion profits per month. So remember, that's more than double what they were at, before we started this war on Ukraine, right? So the war on Ukraine had this great advantage of causing profits to more than double, super profits. Now, what do you think profits have been for the months of February, March, and April? I'm going to ask you, Ian, since our calculated, intentional, unnecessary attack on Iran, what do you think the profits? So they stabilized 2023 to 2025, 8 to 11 billion per month. But this is the coup de grace, as they say, Ian. This is the coup de grace.
The baseline was 8 to 11 billion a month, you said.
Yeah, from 2023 to 2025.
And you want me to guess what it is now?
The last 3 months, February, March, and April.
Let's say 20 billion. Is it 20 billion?
It's more than 20 billion, Ian.
It's 50 billion?
It's more than 50 billion, Ian.
It says more. Is it 100 billion?
Okay, it's 60 to 70 billion. So
60, 70. So and this is in LNG exports.
It's LNG and shale oil.
And shale oil, okay. Over the past 3 months.
So let me just finish before, because I want to hear your response. But I want to, this is my presentation. I'm trying to make things clear. What I'm saying is happening. So I'm suggesting, that these wars, which have been predicted by a lot of people, not just myself, but I've certainly been, seeing this happen, isn't because of the reasons that people are suggesting on the TV. So, when you hear about, Trump saying it's their nuclear program, we gotta attack them because their nuclear program, like, that's just nonsense. And also, I would argue that the idea that it's about Israel, like, Israel has co-opted the United States, and Israel is forcing the United States to attack Iran for the benefit of Israel. So now, I'm not saying that the profits are everything. I'm not saying profits are everything. I can say that they're a definite impetus. They're a definite influencing factor, because we've seen that, these wars have caused, super profits, from 2 to 3 billion, stabilized 2 to 3 billion, or 4 to 5 billion post pandemic, up to the first war that we started, went up to 12 to 15 billion, and then stabilized at 8 to 11 billion. And now with the current war, it's 60 to 70 billion. But it's not just the profits, right? It's monopoly control of global energy, being able to dictate the price to markets that have been captured. And then it's also, we will see this weaponized against China. Like, this is the point. We're creating a global energy scarcity where we are monopoly control the monopoly scarcity that remains, and we're going to weaponize this against China. So we haven't seen that second part yet. We haven't seen it really weaponized against China like it's going to be. That is coming. Right now we're still trying to figure out what to do with Iran, and there's a question, because it's a fine line, and I don't think the U.S. is interested in crashing the global economy. And so they're treading this fine line where they can create a real large, a real large glut, create some scarcity, profit off that scarcity, but they don't want to go too far where the entire global economy collapses. They're not interested in that. And so that kind of explains their attitude towards Iran. They're threatening doing more to Iran, but Iran is threatening right back and saying, well, if you do this, if you do X, Y, or Z, we'll do X, Y, or Z back, and then the global economy will crash, and you don't want that. And Trump really doesn't want that. So they're happy having monopoly control, super profits, and being able to dictate who is allowed access to energy at their exorbitant prices and who is not. So that's really what's going on. And again, we have a meeting between Trump and Xi in, it's scheduled for May. It might get postponed till June, depending on what happened. It was actually scheduled for April 1st, right? I think it was scheduled for April 1st and postponed till May. And it might get postponed again. But this is what is going on. This is the brinksmanship. And all of this is primarily geared towards getting the leverage necessary to contain China, to weaken China, to bring China to heel, to subordinate China to Western interests. And so again, is it going to succeed? Absolutely not. But it's just undeniable that this is a strategy that was only made possible from 1990, when we discovered the technology, when we discovered the resource, and then in 2015, when Saudi Arabia really taught us a lesson by saying, we can just bankrupt your whole shale oil enterprise. So they thought, you know what? Fuck that. We're the United States. We're going to bankrupt your fucking energy exports by, starting a fucking war. And that's just how it's going to be. And also, our vassals in Europe were like, sorry, Europe, you're going to do what we say. You're going to be victimized by the big United States. But really, again, this is a transnational oligarch strategy, and it's not predicated on benefiting any particular nation state. And the thing is, when you look at things from the class perspective, the ownership class in Europe is very happy to do this. And they're happy that the U.S. has blown up the Nord Stream pipeline, has given them an excuse to destroy their own welfare states and create warfare states, because they're really happy to have a warfare state and they don't like the welfare state at all. So plus the warfare state is going to further their interests of containing Iran, Russia, and China. And so the oligarchs around the world are totally on board and supportive, and that's why it's a transnational oligarchy. So Ian, I think hopefully I've been clear, and I do want to hear your rebuttals and any questions that anyone listening might have about my diatribe and my lecture.
Well, so the issue is, and guys, if you look in the description of this video, you will see Billy Bob and my perspectives in written format. Not exactly what we said here, but just the synopsis of what we're talking about. So one thing I mentioned in that post is that it's true that the USA is a lead figure in the LNG market. Roughly 40% of the world's LNG is produced by the United States, and the USA produces 110 billion metric feet, not metric feet, cubic feet per day, and it consumes 80 billion cubic feet per day, and the rest is exported. So it's exporting 30 to 40 billion cubic feet a day. So it's not insignificant. I mean, it's huge in that particular market. However, it's only 3% of the total liquid fuel market. So the idea is, that's being purported here, is that they're eliminating competition. They blew up that field in Qatar. They're shutting down Iranian exports, and of course it hurts all the other Middle Eastern exporters as well, which puts a squeeze on both Europe and on East Asia, who are very dependent on imports. However, I have a couple issues with that. Well, one, LNG cannot replace those liquid fuel exports. The USA couldn't produce that much, even if they wanted to, because, like it says, only 3% of the total market. I mean, we're talking, they can't. I mean, they can sell maybe. I don't know what the limits is, but I mean, it's one thing to say, well, can you send?
Let me just understand and fact check your 3%. So what's 3%? So U.S. Liquid natural gas exports are 3%.
3% of the total global market. Yes.
Okay.
Not just LNG. It's the number one producer of LNG in the world. However, LNG is only one fraction of what's exported around the world, and the source of that figure is the CEO of William Companies, which is an LNG company in the USA.
Okay, but was that number prior to the war in Iran?
It's a Yahoo Finance article published yesterday or the day before yesterday.
Okay. So it's a new article,
right?
But yeah, so my understanding is the U.S. liquid natural gas. The U.S. has a 25% market share of liquid natural gas, and I would expect that'll go up, past 35% before too long.
Now apparently it's 40. Now apparently it's 40%.
Yeah, so no, these are weird numbers, but so I don't know. It's tough for me. I'm not sure what exactly you're measuring when you say 3%, but I shouldn't interrupt you. I should hear you out. And then
my point is, it's not, the USA cannot produce enough LNG to sustain the world's economy. It can't be done. They'll just anybody who needs that energy is not going to switch to LNG, because it's literally 10 times more expensive than piped natural gas or oil or whatever, gasoline or whatever you're using. It's just 10
but
times.
How is that like a contradiction to what I'm saying, or a refutation?
Can I finish? Can you let me finish?
Yeah, I'll be quick.
So the USA can't. So it's not to enrich the USA. The other problem is that it will drive prices through the roof, which harms. So you could say, okay, the USA wants to deindustrialize the world. There's an argument for that. However, the problem is it's also going to deindustrialize the USA. 70%, which I also mentioned in that article, 70% of American farmers have reported that this season they cannot afford the fertilizer, because fertilizer, by the way, is dependent on fossil fuel prices, both in its production and its transport.
Yeah.
So they're going. What that's going to mean is they're going to just put. It doesn't mean they're just that they're going to have to work with what they have. So that means they're going to produce fewer crops. So our yield of grain crops, cash crops, is going to be lower this year. So whatever. So if you're thinking, well, okay, we can make more money producing LNG, but it's canceled out by the fact that American consumers and American companies are also paying more, and as a result of lower profit margins, or just produce fewer crops in the case of farmers. And the other example I bring up in the article, like for example, Russia will actually put export bans or export restrictions every year on their fertilizer and gasoline to keep domestic prices low, because they don't set the prices. It's a market price. If global prices go up, domestic prices also go up. So they cap exports to lower domestic prices. Now, remember when Europe, after you mentioned destruction of Nord Stream 2, and they built all those terminals in Europe to receive American liquefied natural gas. What happened immediately after that? Biden put a cap on LNG exports, and the reason why they did that is because American domestic prices were going through the roof, and Republicans were the ones bashing Biden for, oh look, Biden, Sleepy Joe is, who hates the American citizen, is deliberately increasing prices. So Biden ended up putting, he just paused new exports. He just said no more new exports. And what's interesting about that is on the first day, Trump lifted that ban on his first day. Though I don't know if that's is that 12-dimensional chess, or was Trump just doing that because, the oil companies would like that, but is it actually a good idea? Is it good for the U.S. economy? Is that going to strengthen? Ultimately, is it going to strengthen the American global position, or is it going to weaken it? I'm not convinced it's actually going to strengthen it, because, like we said, you have to worry about domestic. You can't just the prices of oil are very high. Well, that's true, but they're also high for Americans. They're over, I don't remember the exact figure was. It was like $4.18, something like that was the national average price this week, which is one of the highest on record. What is that? I could buy the plan that he's hurting the competition, right? So, it's hurting the European Union. It's forcing China and India. We can't forget India. India is also getting screwed on the spot market. So if we can say, it's hurting those economies, but it is also hurting the U.S. economy as well. And I'm just not convinced this was the plan. I don't think any of these people thought Iran was going to be a difficult, challenge. I'm sure if you ask people in the Trump administration, well, how did you think that war, if you asked them at the end of February, before they launched those strikes, hey, how do you think this is going to be? I'm sure they would have said it'll be over in a few days. I don't think they were lying when they said they were sure it'd be over in a few days, and we would have Iran's oil. We'd have a puppet state in charge. I think that was the plan. I think they did believe their own propaganda. They were. Why wouldn't they? I think that they were planning for Iran to be an easy target, and we're very surprised when it wasn't. So when we're looking at this, what's happening to the global energy market, it's a result of Iran being a difficult opponent, which they didn't expect. So I don't think we can really say it's the plan if it didn't go according to what they were planning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would characterize it differently. But first, before I get into that, I want to just address, you're saying that higher energy prices domestically in the United States are going to lead to further deindustrialization. And I think that's that's fundamentally the opposite of what'll happen, because the expectation is that the European corporations will move here because it'll be way, way less expensive to build a business here than it will be to continue operating in Europe. And so it's a continued deindustrialization of Europe. But this is the thinking is this is how we're going to reindustrialize our country, because now it might be, energy prices overall might be higher, but relative to the rest of the planet, they're going to be lower. So and that's the key fact that you want to consider when you're thinking about it. But the intent isn't the result won't be to deindustrialize further the United States. It'll be to industrialize it, because you're forcing the companies in Japan, companies in Europe, companies in South Korea to relocate here. Even though our labor might be more, the energy prices will offset that, because they're going to be so expensive, 10 times more in Europe and Asia. So that's one point. But okay, so as far as the way that you were describing the plan, so I give a little bit more credit to the planners. And, they might have had a hope. I think they could have hoped, but I think they had contingencies. And they also planned that Iran and Russia, would not just fold, right? And we're seeing them adjust and adapt to, to the strength of Iran and Russia. And we're seeing them continue the basic trajectory towards their objectives and their strategy, despite Iran being strong and despite Russia being strong. And so we see what they're doing with Europe, right? They're going to hand the Russian docket off to Europe. They're going to, the European leaders are all talking about wars in the future. We're going to have to get rid of our welfare state and create warfare states. Like, they're very open about it. All the leaders of all the countries are saying the same exact thing, and they're happy to, because they know that the alternative is the challenging of the capitalist hierarchy. And so they want to keep the hierarchy and things exactly how they are, and they know the way to do that is to go along with the United States and turn their welfare states into warfare states, and that's our future. Now, it's really a dark future for Europe. But the elites, the elites are the elites. The elites don't have darkness. They have the best lighting money can buy, the best healthcare money can buy, the best education money can buy. The elites themselves are insulated from their decisions, and they're justified in their decisions, because they can say, look, it's Trump's fault, and it's Russia's fault. You can't blame us for having to defend ourselves. We have to defend ourselves from evil Russia. Trump's not going to protect us anymore, and so we have no choice but to engage in slashing our welfare states and creating warfare states. I had other things to say, and then I forgot. Help me out.
Okay, I mean, you do give them more credit.
Oh yeah, so that's where I was, and so they have contingency. So that's the contingency for a strong Russia. The contingency for a strong Russia that didn't just fold as they had hoped. I don't think they planned for it to fold. I think they hoped it would fold. They hoped it would be easy, and they hoped they could easily, without doing anything to the global economy, attain full spectrum dominance, total global hegemony throughout the rest of the 21st century. Like, that was their hope. But they had planned on Russia being, resisting that, and they plan on China resisting that, and they have a plan for Iran resisting that. So in Europe, you can see that they had their plan B. Their plan B, if Russia's going to be strong, fine. We will just, we'll utilize all of the Ukrainian blood that we can, and then we'll move to the Baltic blood, and then we'll move to German blood, then we'll move to the UK blood. So they've got contingencies, right? Their plan wasn't predicated on Russia just collapsing, and the same is true of Iran. Their strategy isn't predicated on Iran just folding, and so we're seeing them adjust to this, and we're watching it play out. And again, they're balancing. We can see Trump in real time balancing: should I strike and risk a real collapse in the global economy, or should we just, stabilize the markets and keep things going how they are? So this is what he's, this is what he's weighing. And right now, he understands that it's great for, United States oil exporters who are getting super profits. Their LNG exporters getting super profits the last 3 months. It's really been good for, that industry. And it's also, really putting, the Asian countries at our mercy, and we're going to be able to leverage that. How are we going to leverage that, Ian? We're going to leverage their dependence on us, leverage their weakness and our strength vis-a-vis the energy markets by forcing them to be proxies for us, to start wars with China. That's the future. That's what is coming. And that's the plan. And it's been the plan, for years. It's been really solidified in 2016, 2017 was really when, these plans concretized, and we're just seeing them roll out. But what we're seeing is, we haven't seen the whole thing. We're seeing the beginning of this plan rollout. Like I continue to say, we haven't actually seen the pivot to China. And so people who don't understand what I'm trying to explain don't see it. They don't. China, what does China have to do with this? The U.S. isn't doing anything to China. The U.S. is, being nice to China. China's being nice to the U.S. We don't see anything. But again, all of this is being set up specifically for this, because from the perspective of the transnational oligarchy, China is their peer rival, their primary adversary. And so, Iran, not as big of a rival, Russia, not quite the global rival that China is, just due to China's, manufacturing capacity and their share of the global economy and their number one trading partner of over 140 countries, So that just is why China is the biggest threat to the hegemonic interests of the transnational oligarchy that has its headquarters in the United States, but also controls all of the collective West. So that's where we're at. That's what's going on. But I'll entertain more rebuttals, Ian.
Oh my gosh, he hates his mic. Well, my mic should be fine. Okay. I get this complaint every show. I will get a new mic. I'll order a new mic. I listen to the people. But anyways,
I can hear you fine. So I'm not sure why. Maybe on the record.
Well, Todd complains about the mic every time. So I do listen to feedback, and I don't have actually a professional mic here. So maybe that will make a difference. And we don't want to annoy our viewers. If that's what the people want, I will do it. And mainly the reason I haven't already is because I'm lazy, but I will get off my ass and order a new mic. But to answer your question, I would just say Iran they attacked Iran because they didn't like Iran. I don't think it was even as directed against China or Russia or anyone else as certain anti-imperialist commentators think it was. Because if you have to get through one country to fight a different country, you can't really say a second country was your primary adversary. I think it was actually the country you had to fight through to get to them. So Iran is a regional power. It's probably the strongest. It's if we look at cultural influence, political influence, economic influence, religious influence, I would go so far as to say Iran is the most important country in the Middle East. And if you're a Zionist who wants greater Israel, and you want Israel to be the top dog in the Middle East, you have to get rid of Iran. There's no way you can't get rid of Iran. You can steal territory from Lebanon and Syria and Palestinians, but you cannot have. I accidentally muted myself. Sorry. You cannot have greater Israel until you get rid of Iran. So from that lobby's perspective, it makes a lot of sense that they got to get the USA to take out Iran. Now, from the USA's perspective, well, it's murkier. It's a lot murkier. And actually, there were some small. They were a minority, but even in 2003, when Bush was talking about invading Iraq, there were some conservative voices saying, "Well, why? Why not just be allies with Saddam? We used to be allies with Saddam. Why not just say, hey, we'll pay you to fight Al Qaeda or whatever it was that we wanted him to do instead of invading?" Which, if you look at it from a geopolitical standpoint, they were correct. The USA did not benefit from invading Iraq. The USA's position in the Middle East was worse on every metric after 20 years in Iraq than it was before they invaded. And in fact, Iraq, probably the biggest winner in that war was Iran, because Saddam was a Sunni authoritarian government with a Shia population, and now you have a new quote unquote democratic government that has a bunch of seats in their Congress to pro-Iranian politicians, and they still have a majority Shia population, and all these freedom fighter groups and separatist groups, anti-American groups, are probably at least that's probably true. They probably are communicating with Iran and supported by Iran. So Iraq is much more in Iran's sphere of interest than it was in 2003. So we ask, well, what was the point? But it makes sense from Israel's point of view, because Saddam was, aside from Iran, probably their main regional competitor. Now he's not. Now they got rid of him. Iraq's, and I didn't know this until actually after the Iran war started. Their oil money is in America. U.S. banks control all of their oil revenue and can hold that over their head. Well, we can cut you off from your oil, like they did to Iran. They can cut them off because it's all through the U.S. banking system, their oil revenue. So,
well, it sounds like you just contradicted yourself, because you said that the United States was in a worse position after the Iraq war than they were before. But now you just, and that's what my response would have been to you. Like, you said that the U.S. was in a worse position, but I would have said, no, they're not. They're in a much better position because they control all that oil and they have leverage over it.
Well, they don't physically. That's the thing. They don't physically. They can. It's that Damascus sword. They can drop it. They can sanction Iraq like they sanctioned Iran.
Yeah.
But then, well, okay, what did that give them? What did that give them? Well, it's not.
They didn't have that
physical control. Sanctions are increasingly not working, if you hadn't noticed. They can sanction Iraq again. But what's that? What's the long term? What's the long term benefits? I mean, it's very convoluted, because the USA already controls the world, and it's basically it's this argument. Well, it's like the USA is going to deliberately destroy the system that it uses to control the world so they can control the world. It's like, well, if they already control the world, why do they need to do that? And say, well, to weaken China. It's like, well, why don't they just weaken, if they want to weaken China, why don't they just weaken China instead of all these other steps? We're going to attack Russia, we're going to attack Iran, we're going to attack, it's just very convoluted, and I also don't see a lot of competence from these actors either. I don't look.
I mean, is it pretty competent that the last 3 months they've, had 60 to 70 billions a month in profit, up from, 8 to 11? I mean,
the U.S. military looks like a joke. I mean, the rest. I mean, USA has this media bubble where the average American doesn't know it, but the rest of the world is laughing at how the U.S. military performed in Iran, and that's Trump's fault. He's the one who put them in that position of everybody realizing it's this huge paper tiger, And if Iran can stand up to the U.S. military, then any medium-sized country can stand up to the USA. And um, that's not a thought that was really on anybody's heads 10, 15 years ago.
So how do you think that what you just mentioned about a lack of respect for the U.S. military, how do you think that is going to obstruct the strategy? So I'm again just kind of alleging that there's a strategy here. I'm trying to explain what that strategy is and why it's motivated, what motivates that strategy. And again, I'm not saying the strategy is going to succeed, but you're denying that that's a strategy. You're denying that's a motivation, total global hegemony and defeating China as a peer rival. And then you're pointing to how, the strategy is contradicting itself because it's not succeeding, and it's, exposing the U.S. as having a weak military. And so then my question is, well, how does that, factor into, what I'm saying? I mean, are you saying this is proof that what I'm saying isn't the strategy, or are you saying that that's proof that their strategy is going to fail? Because I do kind of agree that that strategy is going to fail, but nevertheless, this is what is motivating the strategy. This is what the strategy is. And again, you can just point to everything I discussed at the beginning.
If it's so obvious that the strategy is going to fail, well, why would they attempt it at all? I mean, if you have U.S. oil executives saying, like I quoted, they're saying that's
a good question, Ian.
If you agree with them.
But I do feel that I've answered this question many times, and I'm happy to answer it again. But at some point, I want my framework to be incorporated into your understanding, so you don't have to ask me. You can just know what my answer is because I've explained it many times. So the answer is you have to understand class interests, and you can't think in nation state paradigms. You've got to understand that the primary paradigm that really guides events and history is the class paradigm. And so the class interests of the ruling Western oligarch class trumps the interests of any nation state. And so liberals always get confused when they see things that are happening that aren't in the best interest of a nation state, because they just don't understand, the perspective of the ruling class, because that's what really matters. What matters is their understanding of their class interests and what threatens it and how to further it. And so when you understand things in terms of class, things make a lot more sense. But yeah, I get it. Liberals they just scratch their heads. I watch Jeffrey Sachs. I watch John Mearsheimer. I watch all these mindless liberals scratching their. I just don't get what's going on. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, because your fundamental framework isn't reality based. It's based in idealism, and it's based in the idea that nation states are the primary actors, and that's just false. Like, that's not true. So what is true is the transnational ruling Western oligarchy perceives the system that they've created since 1945 to no longer be working in their interest. And they perceive that China is winning the rigged system that they've created, and they have to do something or they will be ass out. They will be completely displaced by Russia, China, and Iran. Right? So these sovereign nations are beating them at their own rigged game, and now they have to overturn the game board and wreck it if they have any chance of turning this around. And so they feel that they are under existential threat by these three sovereign countries, particularly China, and so they've developed a strategy to deal with that. And so I would just disagree with you when you just say that they already control everything. They already have hegemony. If they did already have hegemony, there would be no need to overturn the game board like they're obviously doing. So it's just like,
we seem to make the similar observations. We just disagree on, the why it's happening. Which is fair. The main question, I guess, is what's going to happen now. So it's the weekend. The markets are closing today. There's speculation again that Trump's considering military options again. Now, I've been skeptical. You've been pretty sure that they're going to, or at least you voiced that opinion before. You're pretty sure it's going to go back into military conflict again. That the ceasefire is going to fail, and they're going to go back into military conflict again. I've been of the argument that they want to avoid that, and the reason they want to avoid that is because it would go more of the same. Iran can hit them back harder than they anticipated. However, if you're correct and they just want to throw the game board, then I think it's very likely that they're going to go back into open conflict again. I think if your position is correct, that's what's going to happen. They'll go back into military conflict again. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say it's a correct statement? If they're going to throw the game board, if they just want the oil infrastructure on both sides to be destroyed, they're probably going to re-engage Iran in an open war. Do you think is that a correct statement? Would you say?
Okay, so I mentioned it earlier. It's hard to know with certainty. I think if Trump does something, he's going to want to do something limited, right? And so he might feel like he wants to, cause a reprisal from Iran and, do some more damage to the energy market, which again would even only benefit. So he can pump up the $60 to $70 billion a month profit. Like an attack against Iran could pump that up it could double, right? It could go to $120 billion. Because again, these desperate countries are forced to pay a spot price demanded by the United States. So Trump, these are just tools, like a bombing against Iran. Now there's a threat, there's a risk to bombing Iran because Iran could retaliate, and this is what Iran is threatening to do, to retaliate in a big way, which is not what Trump wants. Trump does not want a total collapsing of the Gulf monarchies. He doesn't want the UAE to be destroyed. So he wants to, he's got to balance this. He's got to be careful. I can't predict with certainty what he's going to do, but I know that he doesn't want to see a total economic collapse. He doesn't want the Gulf monarchies totally destroyed and uninhabitable, which is what Iran is threatening to do. So if he does something, it'll probably be very measured. The effect would be to, further contribute to the total energy scarcity around the planet, to make energy less scarce. So Iran would probably have some of their oil fields taken offline, and some of the oil fields in the Gulf monarchies would be taken offline, which would further create a scarcity, which would just Trump, this is what they want, right? They want a scarcity. They want U.S. monopoly. But I want to point out a couple things because, you were asking me, it made me think of the plunge protection team. So, it's interesting because I learned some things. So I've always been saying, the U.S. wants to attack on a Friday after the markets close. And there's two schools of thought. A lot of people say that they actually want to attack on a Thursday because it allows the U.S. plunge protection team to work for a whole trading session on Friday to stabilize markets. And so the plunge protection team is, has all the biggest, the chairman of the Federal Reserve and just all the biggest economic players in the United States have access to tools and levers and income that can, help to stabilize things and undercut collapsing industries to make sure that there's not, runoffs and the market doesn't just totally collapse. So it's the plunge protection team. And so the thing is, most people think that a Thursday attack, which was yesterday, is more beneficial because it gives them the immediate a whole day's trading to work. The other strategy is to do it on a Friday, after the Friday closing, but then you have a more chaotic Monday. The plunge protection team doesn't have as much control on a Monday as they would on a Friday to stabilize markets. But that wasn't the only thing I wanted to bring up, but that was an interesting thing that I learned, because I had always thought that they would just prefer to attack on a Friday, because that gives the whole 2 weeks of trading, of no trading, to kind of tell everybody, hey, it's not that big of a deal for when the market opens up on Monday. But that's not actually true. Plunge protection team, I wrote that down, and then you said something else that I wanted to respond to.
I basically just said that the throwing the game, flipping the game board would be attacking Iran again, and it sounds like you're reconsidering your earlier you're kind of reconsidering your position that Trump will do a more limited military action. And what would you imagine that to be? What do we mean when we say limited military action?
No, he'd have to have some kind of an agreement with Iran. He'd have to make it very clear to Iran that, what he's doing is limited. And so, again, the point of a further action would be to, create more of an energy scarcity, to give the United States more leverage with their exports. I mean, and that is the point. That is the point of what we're seeing. And he's balancing a total destruction of the global economy with maximizing U.S. leverage and control over scarce energy resources. So this is kind of the paradigm that I see Trump is approaching and playing with. And this explains, what we see, where, he's really bellicose, and then he's like conciliatory. Oh, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to have an agreement. There's no agreement. Okay, well, you're going to do a blockade. We'll do a blockade. So, no, Trump is in a tough place. Iran is not making it easy. But the ultimate objective is to consolidate monopoly control over global energy. And one of the reasons you have to do that is because you don't control Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia and OPEC. Okay, I remember what it was. I want to bring up the UAE leaving OPEC, because that's an important factor. So the U.S. didn't control OPEC. The U.S. couldn't set prices. And we saw that when Saudi Arabia increased production to bankrupt all of our shale oil extracting companies, right? And they did it successfully. They taught the United States a lesson, and that is what pissed the United States off. And that's why we see what is going on now. U.S. is teaching Saudi Arabia a lesson in a real way. And the UAE is part of that. So the UAE and Saudi Arabia are not on friendly terms. And the UAE just, left OPEC and really aligned themselves very, very tightly with the United States. So this is dangerous. It's dangerous for the UAE. It's a dangerous play, but this is the reality of what is going on. And so what UAE, by leaving Saudi Arabia, by leaving OPEC, it decreases the power of OPEC. It increases the monopoly power of the United States. And it's really a big win for Trump. And it's a big win for this whole strategy of monopolizing, global energy reserves and ensuring that the United States dictates price, not OPEC, not Saudi Arabia. Because, in 2016, Saudi Arabia dictated the price, and they really screwed the United States. And so the United States is striking back. And again, they can strike back even harder by bombing Iran again and getting Iran to attack OPEC countries, Saudi Arabia, but again, the risk is that another attack against Iran is just going to destroy UAE. But I don't really think the United States cares, honestly. And I don't really think that the sheiks, the corrupt monarchies that own the UAE, I think they're okay. They'd be okay with, significant hardship, because again, this class of people that have allied themselves with the, Western oligarchs, they're not going to suffer at all. It's the people of their countries that are going to suffer, but they themselves are not going to suffer. And so they'll just move to any of their 20,000, 20 mansions in the Hamptons. I mean, they're going to be well taken care of. They're going to be able to survive and ride this out from a place of comfort and luxury. And so it's the people of these countries who are going to suffer. Anyway, you can't really grasp any of this if you're trapped in the liberal paradigm of nation states and thinking of, how does this benefit the people of the United States? They don't care about the people of the United States. They don't care about the people of the Gulf monarchies. They don't care about the people of Iran. And to a great extent, they don't care about the people of Israel. Like, this isn't about benefiting the people of Israel. The people of Israel have been under attack. Like the people of Israel have had to sacrifice for this strategy. And so the liberal framework results in silly understandings and silly explanations for what's going on. And so you've got to understand the class dynamic to be able to really appreciate the reality of what's going on. And watching the news media is only going to make you dumb.
I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of those we'll have to wait and see how it plays out kind of things.
For sure.
I don't think there's an easy way out for Trump, though. I do think.
But why can't we look at history? Why can't we look at the history I explained at the beginning of the show? Like, why are there going to be huge investments into export infrastructure for U.S. domestic liquid natural gas and shale oil at a time when those things were extremely unprofitable and there's no way they could have competed? The only explanation for why those huge logistic endeavors were invested in was because there was an understanding that there will be a war that'll block Russian exports to Europe, and that will block Middle Eastern exports to Asia. That is the only way anybody with a sane mind would have invested the hundreds of billions into this infrastructure that were invested. And it's only through the windfall profits of $60 to $70 billion a month that it would have been worth it, that these people would have agreed. So again, the coherent
70 billion is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a lot for me. I'd be very happy if I had $70 billion. But for a country the size of the USA, it's nothing.
No, but the investors, it was private investors, right? Private investors invested in this infrastructure to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. And it didn't make any sense, Ian. It made no market sense at all because it was so expensive to extract our oil relative to our competitors. So they knew the business model included a war that would have, severed and ended the competition. That's the whole point. Like they were given assurances that the competition wouldn't be there, and we needed to build this infrastructure to reap in the whirlwind profits once we initiated these wars. This is the point. So these wars weren't because Iran has a nuclear weapon. Like that's not why.
I just don't see. I mean, I know you don't believe in nation states and all, but I think the USA is going to collapse within the next 5 years. It will look like Zimbabwe, basically, like complete failed state. I don't see how that's going to help investors. The USA is a failed state where you need an armed convoy to drive from one city to the other, literally, like, the worst third world country you can think of. I just don't. I mean, maybe it's true. Maybe that's just what they want.
No, I don't. I'm not claiming that's going to happen. I don't understand why you think that's going to happen. I mean, that makes no sense.
I mean, if they lose the petro, I mean, if they lose all of these oil, if we lose this petrodollar system with almost 40 trillion in debt.
No, so Ian, what do you mean? We're not losing the petrodollar system. The petrodollar system was unsustainable, and we're transitioning it from a
being
petro.
an oil producer to being an oil producer.
Right.
Being a
No,
petro
look.
state.
So the petrodollar system was contingent on OPEC selling their oil in US dollars. That was what the petrodollar system was. And the new system that we're transitioning to also forces everyone to buy in US dollars because we're the primary producer and exporter of the energy now, or at least we want to control it, right? So we want to control the UAE, and we do because they've just allied themselves with us totally. They left OPEC, they joined the United States. So the United States is creating its own energy cartel, not dependent on OPEC, because again, Saudi Arabia pissed us off and showed us that we don't have control, that they can set the price. And so we're showing them, no, fuck you, we'll set the price, motherfuckers. That's exactly what they're doing. And so again, I'm just not understanding. It just seems that you're not understanding.
We brought this up at the beginning of the show. The USA it is not physically possible for the USA to produce that much LNG. I mean, so we could say the world economy collapses, 90% collapse, just like 200 years, setback 200 years. So it's 5-10% what it is now. And then the USA is the main energy supplier. I mean, I could.
So, let me
collapse
explain.
To that extent, I mean, you're talking
Ian,
about.
So I've been addressing what you just said a couple times already. I'm like, Trump is balancing the risk of that happening with maximizing monopolization of energy. And so this is the risk. It is the risk. So you're just assuming that 90% is going to go 200 years into the past. And I'm saying, well, Trump is working very hard not to let that happen.
Not what I said. That's not physically possible. It's much more likely it'll just be the U.S. that collapse. I mean, I think Europe will collapse before the U.S. Africa might collapse. India might collapse. But before you get this type of monopoly you're talking about, the U.S. will collapse. I mean, the dollar will collapse because you cannot physically. I mean, because we're talking trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. That's what keeps hyperinflation away. Is just the sheer volume of dollars. I mean, if you say, oh, well, they're going to become a petro state, well, it's not physically possible for the USA to be a petro state that trades dollars in the volumes to keep the dollar afloat. It's too big now. It's 3%. It's 3% of the global. I think I'm having a hard time believing they could increase it on the scale you're talking about, or reducing the world economy enough.
Well,
scale.
I mean, we control Venezuela.
Because 70 billion is not a lot of money. The U.S. economy is $38 trillion every year. 70 billion, 80 billion, 100 billion is literally a drop in the bucket. So you can't just say, oh, we don't need the petrodollar system because we're going to sell LNG and oil. Well, it's too small. We're talking the figures are too small. You can't.
No, the petrodollar was contingent on OPEC selling their energy in U.S. dollars. So OPEC is still selling their energy in U.S. dollars, but their ability to extract it and sell it is being diminished. So there's an artificial scarcity of energy is being created. The United States is monopolizing that, and they will once the monopoly obviously is going to be sold in U.S. dollars. And so I don't see a crash of the petrodollar system. It's being transferred, and there's a different term for it. It's like the petro liquid natural gas system now. And it's instead of being controlled by OPEC, it's being controlled by the United States through our control of Venezuela, UAE, and other vassals that are completely subordinate to us. Unlike Saudi Arabia, who was intransigent enough to think that they could do what they wanted, against our interests. And so we're teaching them a lesson. We're taking Iran out. We're regularly every day attacking Russian extraction energy infrastructure. And so, as this continues, I mean, this is just, again, like, I mean, you got to see the forest for the trees. And I mean, it's just very obvious, what's going on. And so I'm hearing you, and you're,
well, it's Occam's razor. It's Occam's razor. You're telling me, it's this 5,000 dimensional chess, 1,000-year plan of the USA to,
is it that convoluted? Am I making it sound convoluted? It's very simple.
500 IQ, chess move. And I look at it, I just see like, just like late stage empire dysfunction right before it collapses. That makes much more. It's like you have all these special interest groups that want their own little wars. So you just have this empire right before it collapses, starting all these random stupid wars because it's just so corrupt and incompetent.
But why would you say they're random and stupid right after I explain the logic? Because I spent a good 5 minutes at the beginning of the show going through the logic. And how come you can just reject all that and just say, no, it's random and stupid? No, there's a thought process.
Well, you know what? Yeah, it's hard to say. You might be right. In 5 years, the USA might be a very prosperous, powerful, hegemonic country. And I will have to say, Billy Bob, you were right. I thought the USA was going to become a third world country where people cook rats on the street, and that didn't happen. You were right. I will be the first to.
So let me just address that, because again, I mean, you're falling back into your liberal perspective as if the ruling class cares about the prosperity of the people, and that's just silly. So stop assuming that the ruling class, the Western ruling class, thinks about the prosperity. They think about their own power and control. So in 5 years, they definitely hope to have more power and control over the planet than they do now, and that is going to be through their leveraging of their monopoly on energy. And their ability to crash any economy by denying them energy that is intransigent and doesn't subordinate themselves to our dictates. So that's the power they want. And they're willing to have the United States working class sacrifice to attain that power. So they're asking us to sacrifice. And they're going to sell it to us by saying, look, you're sacrificing, but you're not sacrificing nearly as much as the Europeans. And they'll be right. And then they're also going to blame China for it. They're also going to blame Iran. And guess what? Most people in this country are going to believe them, because people in this country aren't very smart, Ian. That's just the reality of it. So I want to talk about this really quick, unless you got a rebuttal.
No, go ahead.
So I did watch this. So it was an hour and 47 minutes, I believe. Brian Berletic just kind of was playing the Senate hearing on arms services or something like that. Some Senate hearing where, the generals explain what their strategy is, and the senators just demonstrate that they're just prostitutes for the military-industrial complex. And so the benefit of watching that Brian Berletic, he's kind of doing a play-by-play of this Senate hearing, is that, he really points out what is the driving factor in the thinking of our elected leaders. And I shouldn't even call them leaders, of these elected puppets, and they're not even elected. They're bought and paid for by the military industrial complex. But it's so transparent and shameless. And if your average liberal that doesn't know anything about anything watches it, they're not going to get it. They're not going to really know what happens. But Brian does a great job of showing how that they're just, what is really driving the strategy and the questions, and what are they interested in doing? The senators themselves. And what they're really interested in doing is making mass profits for the military industrial complex, which again is more proof that, what's going on is not that Israel captured the United States and is getting the United States to do things against the interests of the United States. So that's a silly explanation for reality. And the more useful, proper explanation is, we've got a transnational oligarchy, and they have class interests, and they think about their class interests and they pursue their class interests, and their class interests are totally different from what the average liberal assumes the national interest is, and because that's the liberals' problem. They think, well, how come this doesn't benefit our national interest? It doesn't make American people prosperous. Why is this going on? I just don't get it. Like, you want to punch them right in their fucking face, Ian. You want to punch them right in their fucking face because they're dumb. It's like, no, it's not the national interest. It's the class interest that's being pursued. If you understand that, things fucking make sense. And once it makes sense, it gets you mad and you want to oppose it. And you want to call it out. And again, so that's what I appreciate you letting me, lecture you and get red-faced explaining things to you because it's really ridiculous. So, but yeah, it's a lot for people to process, and especially when you're kind of just confined to this way of thinking that no, the government is here to help the people. So why aren't they doing it? I don't get it. Let me try and explain it with this framework. It's Israel. Israel's or it's just mass incompetence. It's just mass chaos and incompetence. I don't understand it. They're gonna collapse. It just doesn't make any sense. They're dumb. No, they're not. They're smart. They're pursuing their interests. Anyway, yeah, that was what I wanted to say today on our 200th episode. And I feel stupid because I really should have appreciated more this proof, because I really think what I explained at the beginning of the show is proof of everything I'm saying. The fact that, these private investors were pouring billions of dollars into this infrastructure that made no sense. And it was such a risky investment. It wasn't a risky investment. It was a stupid investment, given the material conditions that existed at the time. So they had to have known that wars were in the future. They had to have known that the U.S. military was going to make sure that Russian energy was going to be severed from going to Europe. They had to make sure that Middle Eastern energy was going to be severed from going to Asia. They had to have known that in 2016, Ian, and they did. So that's the most important point. That is the most important point. Like, this is planned. They're planning. They're thinkers. They're strategists. And what they're thinking about is their class and protecting the hegemonic interests and defeating those obstacles and rivals that are impediments to their hegemony. So that's what this is about. And yeah, I mean, I should have been yelling this since 2016 if I was smarter. So to me, it was just really eye-opening to learn all this. And honestly, yeah. So actually, yeah, go to Ian's blog, thereadingjunkie.com, and then there's a link.
Yep.
There's a link to the Brian Berletic. So there's two things actually. So the link there is to just Brian talking to, I forget who he was talking to. Maybe it was Glenn Deason, about how the investments would have never been made if the private investors weren't promised and assured that very soon there would be a war against Russia and a war in the Middle East that took all that energy offline, and they would no longer have to compete with Russian energy or so that's what that link is for at thereadingjunkie.com. But there's also, if you go to just Brian Berletic's video on his YouTube site, there's an 1 hour and 47 minute thing where he analyzes in granular detail this Senate hearing on, armed forces, something like that. But that's a great one too. And that's the one that Todd mentioned. And so I wanted to plug that. But no, that's it. And I mean, it's not going to get any better. Like, this is going to get worse. There's going to be a pivot to China. There's going to be some kind of proxy war waged against China. And if we think that, we've seen shocks to the global economy with this, no, just wait until you see when the United States turns its sights on the number one trade partner of 140 countries. See how bad that is going to, affect the planet. And I mean, like, it's not bad enough already. There's going to be people fucking starving by the probably hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions, due to this lack of fertilizer, right? Like, this is going to have long-term ramifications on harvests, on the food availability, and those poor countries that aren't profitable to and don't have the wealth to buy food at higher prices, there's going to be starvation. There's going to be massive hardship, and this is all being strategically and thoughtfully implemented by the ruling class, because they don't give a fuck about humanity. They don't give a fuck about fucking poor people or poor countries. Like, they care about their own global hegemony, and that's what is driving these evil policies. There's no other word for it. It's evil, and it's going to have disastrous effects. And we're only at the very beginning. On that note, thank you everyone for watching. That's a bad note. That's a terrible note.
No, I think it's a good note. It's a good note. It's a good closing note, because I actually don't really have any particular disputing points on it.
And it'll be interesting to see if Trump decides to escalate further. We know what'll happen with a further escalation. If there's a further escalation, the price of energy will go way up, and that'll just it'll go way up. There'll be a further decrease in available global energy supplies. It's already way down because of the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. But if there's another attack, it's going to go down even further. And probably a lot of these oil wells will be bombed. And even if these oil wells aren't bombed, what's going to happen is the overcapacity problem, where everyone in the Middle East is running out of capacity, storage capacity, and they're going to have to shut off their wells and shut off their pumps. And a lot of experts say that that alone can take offline these vast reserves of energy for years to come. It'll take years if they're ever even able to be recovered. So you can't it's not like a light switch you can flip on and off. And that is actually going to happen whether or not there's even additional bombing. So these are all the things that we're going to watch, and we will reconvene on Tuesday. Zatunia from Puerto Rico says she's going to check out Brian Berlet's pieces. You guys really should. I highly encourage that. And also check out Ian's blog. Watch my Facebook. I'm also on X. I think I'm streaming on X today for the first time because I got a premium membership, and I'm trying to promote my X account because, I think this is important stuff that needs to get out. I mean, I know it's important stuff that needs to get out. And so I'm paying premium prices to have premium X. And with the premium, they let me live stream these things to X. And I'm also posting everything I post at Facebook on X because I'm not limited to just 280 characters. And so check us out. And then, thank you, everyone. We had a good turnout of the live program and a lot of comments. Thank you for that. We will try and reconvene on Tuesday. See you then. Bye.